Now, Katie, can I just confirm that it's Excel that you see on the screen and not Adobe?
Yes, I see Excel.
Okay, because I got two screens going. I got the handout on my other screen. Want to make sure I had it in the right window. Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to data validation. What I have on my screen right now is a data file that was sent out to you, and Terry sent a new version yesterday because I realized that the one that I had sent out had partially completed exercises in it. So I wanted to make sure you all had a clean one that didn't have anything done to it yet. So you'll know you have the most current one because the tabs at the bottom will be color coded. The one I initially sent was not color coded, so that's how you can tell the difference. So Katie and Terry's put a new version in the panel. If you are not seeing the correct one right now, you can grab the current version out of the panel screen. So what we're going to be looking at today is just some different examples of how you can use data validation, and it's something that's not used all that often in Excel, but it's really helpful to help limit mistakes when and make sure that you're entering clean data into your spreadsheets. And especially if you're setting something up for somebody else to use, maybe a sort of a new user to Excel who might make some mistakes in entering the data, this just makes sure it comes in properly. Because if you are going to use your data for a pivot table, for a chart, even your formulas will not function correctly if the data is not entered correctly. So I'm going to give you a number of examples today that show the different types of data validation. We're going to be looking at how to make sure that the data is entered in all caps only. We're going to show how to prevent invalid dates, a couple of different variations on drop-down lists, how to prevent duplicate values from being entered, allowing only numeric entries or text entries, how to validate an entry based on another cell, allowing only the entry of weekdays, restricting what is entered, making sure that entries contain specific text. And finally, with all of this, I'll be giving examples of creating meaningful error messages. So if the wrong information is entered, so how it prevents the information from being entered is there'll be an error message. And you want to make sure that that error message is meaningful so the user knows what they did wrong. So as we go through each topic, you can see the tabs are labeled based on what they're going to demonstrate. So the tab I'd like to make sure is selected right now is the allow uppercase entries only. And you can see all that's in this tab right now is the heading of postal code. Now this example is going to show you how you can ensure that data is entered in all caps. And the example I'm going to use, I don't know how many Canadian viewers we have, but I'm from Canada. So I'm going to show you how you can control the entry of Canadian postal code, because Canadian postal codes have a combination of capital letters and numbers, and they're supposed to be entered in capital letters, but it's really easy to forget to do that. So this is going to accept the entry of both text and numbers, but the text has to be uppercase. So this is going to be achieved using a formula with the upper function as well as the exact function. And the upper function is what's going to convert the text to uppercase. And the exact function is used to compare the cell entry with the uppercase version to see if they're the same. And if they're not, then the entry is considered valid. So the first step in setting this up is to select the range of cells that you want to apply the validation to. So I actually want this to apply to the entire first column where I have the postal codes. So that means from cell 1 or row 1 all the way down to row 1,048,576, because I don't know how big this spreadsheet is necessarily going to get. So just to cover my bases, I want the entire column except for the heading. So how you can easily select the entire column without selecting the heading is with your cursor in A2. So I've got A2 selected. I'm going to press the Shift key first, then the Control key, followed by the down arrow key. So the 4 directional arrows that you have on the right side of your alphabetic keys. I'm pressing that down arrow key, and that has now highlighted all the way down to, you can see row 1,048,576. So now that I have that whole thing selected, I'm now going to go to the Data tab. And under the Data tab, you can see there's a Data Validation button. and it's split. The top half is just the icon, and then the bottom half actually has a drop down. Now, I only want to access the data validation option initially, so I can just click the button and the dialog box will come up. If I accidentally click the bottom half, I could then choose data validation, but that's 2 clicks. So it's easier just to click the top half of the button, and you will then get taken to the data validation dialog box. So there's 3 tabs in this dialog box. So the first tab is the settings tab. And under allow right now, it's set for any value, and that's why you can enter any value in the cell. Now I'm going to click where it says any value, and I'm going to change this to read custom. And when I choose custom, I can then enter a formula in the formula box. So the formula I'm going to put in is equal, or the function I guess I'm putting in. So equal exact, so that's the exact function. And then I'm going to put an open bracket followed by A2. So that's the first cell of the range. And then a comma, and then the word upper, and then another bracket followed by A2, and then 2 close brackets. Okay, so that's going to take, it's going to match what I enter into this cell and make sure that it's going to double check and make sure that it is upper. So at this point, I'm not going to worry about doing an error alert initially. I just want to see if this works. So I'm going to click OK. And now in A2, I'm going to type a postal code without using capitals. So I'll take my caps lock off. Okay, so I'm entering it in incorrectly, and I get this message. It says the value doesn't match the data validation restrictions defined for this cell, asking me if I want to retry. So I can click retry, and then I can type it correctly with the capitals, and I don't get an error. Even though I put in A2, because I had that whole range selected, this will now work for all of the other cells. So now I'm going to do it again with it incorrect, and again to get the error message. This time I'm going to cancel. So we should put an error message in that makes more sense. So in order to put in an error message, we're going to again select the cells again. So I'm making sure I'm at A2, going to hold the shift key, press control, and the down arrow key so I get it all selected. And now I'm going to go back to data validation, and it remembers what I put in, but now I'm going to click the error alert tab. And by default, the style of it is stop. There is choices of warning and information. I just want to leave it as stop because it's incorrect. And now I'm going to I can put whatever I want here for the title. This is the title of the error message. So I'm just going to put uppercase. And in the error message, I'm going to indicate enter the postal code with the caps lock key on. Because if caps lock is on, then I'll be assured I get capitals. So now I'm going to click OK. And now I'm going to try this again. I'm going to do it in lowercase. And it gives me the correct message. So it doesn't fix it for you. It just checks the data and gives you the appropriate message so you know you need to fix it. So now I'm going to click retry, type it correctly. Oops. Now it's not checking to see that I put the correct number there, but there I don't get the message. Now, a note that you'll see in the handout, if you wanted to force lowercase, you could, instead of using the word upper, so the function will be exactly the same, but you could use the word lower. And if you wanted it to be proper case, which would be capital on the first letter and then the rest lowercase, then you could use the word proper. So those are a couple of options. If after you enter the data validation, if you want to make sure it's clear, you could select the whole thing again, go back to data validation. So if I didn't want the validation there anymore, I could click clear all and that would remove it. But for now, I'm going to leave it there. But that's how you could clear it and then start again if you wanted to try a different validation on those cells. So that's the first example. And again, normally I would stop for questions, but please at this point, if you do have any questions about this particular one, go ahead and put it in the chat screen and I will either answer that at the end or I can follow up with email. So now I'm going to move on to the next tab, which is the invalid dates. And we're going to look at a couple of different ones here. Entering dates is something that's very common in Excel, but unfortunately it's very common for users to enter the wrong date. So in this first example, I'm going to demonstrate how to prevent the entry of a future date. And the assumption of this would be that, say, users are recording transactions that have occurred, and the date must either be today or a date in the past. You can't record a transaction that's occurred in the future necessarily, in, say, in this scenario. So this particular one is going to prevent the entry of any date in the future. So as we did in the first example, I'm going to make sure I have everything selected. So I'm going to press Shift Control and the down arrow, and I'm going to go to the data validation button, so the top half. And now you can see it's still on error alert. That's from when it doesn't have the same error alert, but it's kept that tab selected. So I'm going to make sure I click back on settings. And then in the allow, I'm going to click, and instead of choosing custom, I'm going to choose date. And then in the allow, right here where it says data, where it says between, I'm going to click there, and I'm going to choose less than or equal to. And the end date is today's date, which I'm going to put in using the today function. So this is a function that you normally can type in a spreadsheet that will give you today's date. And I'm putting the function in this dialog box. So it's going to check to see that the date that I enter is either today's date or something less than today's date. Otherwise, I will get an error. So because I now know that I need to be a little bit more clear with my errors instead of the default error, while I'm still in this dialog box, I can click error alert, and then I'm going to, for the title, I'm going to put invalid date, and then for the message, I'm going to indicate the date entered must not be in the future. And again, this can be however you want to word the message. So I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to first of all try putting in today's date, which is April 14th. Not a problem. I'm going to put in yesterday's date. Again, not a problem. But as soon as I put in tomorrow's date, which is the 15th, I get an error. So it says the date entered must not be in the future. So here's where you see the title. So that's what I put, whatever you put in that title box will show here. And then whatever you put in the error message will show at the bottom. So again, I could click retry, and then I could fix the date. I'll just delete it at this point. Now, another example of a date control, in this next example, I'm going to limit the entry of only Monday to Friday dates. So I'm not going to allow a Saturday or a Sunday date to be put in. So once again, I'm going to select the range of data, and I'm going to go to the top half of the data validation button. And in settings, I'm going to change the allow to custom. And for the formula, I'm going to use the weekday function. And I'm putting in B2 because that's the cell that I'm in now. So I'm in the second column, I'm in B2, and closing bracket, and then I'm going to put in less than 6. So that's what's going to check to see if it's Saturday or Sunday, but that it's got to be less than, because there's 7 days in the week. So as long as it's less than 6, then we know it's Monday to Friday. And again, I'm going to go to error alert while I'm in the dialog box. I'm going to use the same title as before. And the error message will be the date entered must be a weekday. Okay, and I'm going to try putting in Saturday's date, which will be the 17th. And I got an error message. So it will only accept the 16th because that's Friday's date. Okay, so from there, I'm going to move on to the drop-down lists. Now with the drop-down lists, this is I use this one a lot. This is going to allow me to have a list of choices in a cell for the user to select from. So it's useful when you have a list of names, products, regions, departments, anything that you want the entry to be limited to those choices. So in order to create the drop-down list, you can name a list of items based on a named Excel table. And the reason why you want to use the Excel table, I could do this without an Excel table, but if I use an Excel table, that way if I add or delete from the list, so if I want to add more items, I don't have to redefine it. It'll just pick up the new entries. So I always make sure that I create my list and I make sure it's a table, which I'll show you how to do right away. And then once the table is created, you use that list as a source for the drop-down list. So the table that you're going to use can be part of the spreadsheet, or it can be a separate tab. So I'm going to show you both examples. So in this first example, you can see I have a list of departments, and they're close to where my list of, like I could put this list somewhere way over far on the spreadsheet that nobody's going to see. So it still could be part of the spreadsheet. But just so you know, you don't necessarily want that visible, or as I said, it could be a completely separate tab. So with the list of items or the table of items, you need a heading for the list. So I've put the word department up here, and then immediately below it in a single column, you type your desired entries, and you don't leave any blank lines. And as I said, you'll see that in the notes, it can be entered anywhere on the worksheet or on a completely separate tab. The next step is to select any cell within the list, and I'm going to leave the data tab and I'm going to go to home, and on the home tab I'm going to go where it says format as table in the styles group, and I'm going to pick any of the formats. It doesn't really matter what you pick. I'm just going to go with the first one, and we want to make sure when we choose this that my table has headers is checked, because that's going to use the word department as a header. So I'm now going to click OK, and now you can see if I click off this, you can see it's alternated the shading. Sorry, this is called banded rows, and I can see there's a little arrow here beside department. So that's how I know it's a table. I also know it's a table because I now have a table design tab up here at the top. If I didn't want it in these banded rows, I could just uncheck the banded rows option. If I don't think I'm going to use the filter button, I'm going to turn that off as well, but it's still set up as an actual table. Once the table is created, the next step is to actually name the list, and the list itself is everything but the heading. So I'm going to highlight all 4 names. And to name the list, I'm going to go to the Formulas tab, and I'm going to go to Define Name. And in the Define Name, I'm going to enter the desired name. So I'm going to call this departments, and I'm going to use plural. So that way it's separate from the name of the table. Okay, because you can see the name of the table is down here. So I'm now going to click OK. And if I want to just double check the names, I'm going to click Name Manager, and I can see that there's the department name, and then there's actually the table here as well. So they're both listed in here. But the table, you can see it's actually got the word department in brackets. Just wanted you to identify that the two are separate. So plural for the range, and then singular for the actual name of the table. Okay, so now to create the drop-down list, I'm going to select the cells where I want the drop-down to be. So again, I want this to be in the entire column. So once again, I'm going to hold the Shift key, hold Control, and then hit the down arrow key. So it's all selected. Now I'm going to go to the Data tab, and I'm going to click the Data Validation button at the top. Click on the Settings tab, and in the Settings tab under the Allow, I'm going to choose List. And in the source field, I'm going to click in the source field, and I could type equal departments if I remembered that, but if I couldn't remember the name, I could press the F3 function key. You'll see that note in your handout, and there it gives me the name. So if I forgot what name I used, this would be a way of double checking. And now you can say it says equal departments. And now I'm going to click OK. And now as I click in each one of these cells, you can see an arrow appears. And if I click on the arrow, there are my choices. So it's giving me the 4 choices. Now again, because we had set this up as a table, if I need to add or delete entries, the list is going to automatically update. So I'm just going to click here below sales, and I'm going to put in finance, and then I'll make a legal department. So I've added 2 departments. If I now go back here to the drop down, you can see they've automatically been added. If I needed to get rid of a list of an item, let's say that I don't really want to have finance and accounting, so I want to get rid of finance. If I want to delete it, you can see when I delete it, now I've left a gap. So I can't leave a gap here. So I'm just going to pull legal up to there. And now when I look in my list, and it's giving me a blank one at the bottom, so I'd actually want to delete that. So I'm going to go to the table design. Actually, sorry, I'm going to go to home. I'm going to go here to delete, and I'm going to choose delete cells. And that will delete that cell. You can see now that's the bottom of the table, and now I don't have a blank cell at the bottom. Okay, so again, if I wanted to delete accounting, what I could actually do is go up here to delete, choose delete cells, and it deletes that cell and it moves everything up. So that's a cleaner way to get rid of the choice. Okay, so that's a simple drop-down list. And now what is also possible is to create what's called a dependent drop-down list. So I'm now going to go to the next tab. So you can see what I've got here is I've got state and I've got city. So what I want to have happen here is in the state column, I want to be able to pick a state. And then based on what state I choose, I want only the applicable cities to be listed. So this is called a dependent drop-down list. So the city list is going to depend on the state list. So the steps are going to be similar to what we did in the previous example. And in this example, I've actually created a separate tab called cities and states. And so you can see what I've done is I've just listed some states. Obviously, I'm not going to list all of the US states. That would take too long. So I've listed some states, and then I haven't listed all of the cities. I've just done a few, just so you can get the idea. So I've listed I've listed 5 cities in each state. So how this is going to work again is in my other sheet, in the list of states, I'm going to see the list that is here. And then if I chose Alabama, I'm only going to see the Birmingham, Huntsville, Montgomery, et cetera. I'm only going to see the cities that are applicable. So in order to set this up, the first thing is to type a heading for the first list, which has already been done for you. We've got state, and then immediately below it, the desired entries. Again, without leaving any blank lines. And then to set this up now as a table, I'm going to this time select the cells on the list. And the reason why I'm doing that is if I didn't select it first, it would pick up these other ones. So in the other example, when we did this other one, I didn't actually have to highlight it. I could just click anywhere in it and it would pick it up. But in this case, because I only want this part of it and not the rest of it, I'm going to highlight it first, and I'm going to go to Format as Table, and I'm going to choose Table, making sure that my table has headers is checked. And then as I did before, I'm going to turn off the banded rows and the filter button. So there's my first list. And then I'm going to name the list while I'm at it as well. So now I'm going to select just the names, not the heading. And then I'm going to go back to Formula, going to go back to Define Name, and I'm going to call this States. Okay, and now for this for the cities, what you can see I've got here is I want to create a whole. I need to create the table first, and I want to create the table for this whole thing now. So this way I don't have to highlight it. I'm actually sorry, I gotta refresh my memory here. Yeah, so it does. Okay, so in step 4, I've got format the list of states and city as one table. I wanted to make sure it didn't need to be separate ones. So I'm going to, I didn't highlight it all this time. I'm just going, as you can see, it's going to pick up the whole list of cities. And again, I'm making sure that my table has headers is selected. And again, I'm going to turn off the banded rows and the filter button. So I have 2 tables. I've got one for my states and then one for my cities. So I've named the state one already states, but now for the list of cities, I'm going to select the headings and their items. So I'm going to select all of this. So this is different. With this one, I just highlighted this much and I created the individual name. But now because I want to do a bunch of names at once, I'm going to highlight all of this. And when I go to formulas, I'm going to choose create from selection. And when I do that, it is suggesting top row and left column. I don't want it to be based on the left column, just the top row. So by unchecking left column, it's going to pick up all of these names and use those as names. So this is a shortcut you can take when it's really all the same. If I could have done them individually like I did this one, but this is just a much faster way of doing it. And now I'm going to click OK. And now if I check my name manager, what I've actually got now is you can see I've got names for each one of these cities at the top. Okay, so now that I've set that up, I'm now going to create the drop-down list. So I'm going to go back to the dependent drop-down list tab. And I'm going to select the state first. So I'm going to select the entire state column. And I'm going to go to the data tab, to the data validation button. And in the cities, I'm going to choose list, like I did before. And then in the source, I'm going to click in there. I'm going to press F3 to get my list, and I'm going to look for states. And again, I could have just typed equal states as a shortcut. And now I'm going to click OK. And now I'm just going to see that I can click in here, and I'm going to choose one of the states. I'm going to pick California. Okay, so right now it's not giving me anything for the cities, but now I'm going to click in the city column, select the whole column, go to my data validation tab button, and again, choose list. And now this is where it's key is the source is going to be, I'm going to use what's called the indirect function. So this is telling it to go and look in the previous column. And even though I'm only putting A2, because I've selected everything, it's going to do A3, A4, etc. So now I can click OK. And now I'm going to see that when I look in here, I only get the list of cities for California. And now if I click in the next row, if I choose a different state, I'm going to choose Colorado. Now I can see I only get the Colorado. So each one of these, I'm going to get only the appropriate choices. So now that I see that that's working, if I go back to city and states, it would be really easy to add another city if I left out one that I wanted to now add to the list. Basically, you would just click in the column. So let's say here in Arizona, I want to add Phoenix. So now when I go back, if I choose Arizona, I now see that Phoenix is in the list. So again, you get that functionality as long as you make sure you've created the list as a table, which again, I said it's best to do that. Now, if I accidentally if I'd left a cell blank, I don't know if this will show here, it's not giving me any choices, but initially when I first created the list and I used this indirect function, if you look back on step 4 in your instructions, and this is on page 9, it says in A2, select one of the states in the drop-down list. If I had skipped that step, and if I had not chosen a state first before I tried to create the dependent drop-down list in the cities, I would have got the error message that you see displayed in your handout on page 10. I would have got the message that says the source currently evaluates to an error. So you get that message if you forgot to fill in. So initially when you're creating the city drop-down list, there does have to be something here. Otherwise it's not going to work. Or it will work. I mean, you'll get an error message, So just wanting you to be aware of the error message is not really that clear, but it comes up if you forgot to leave something in. And you can see once you've created it, you can clear it. So then just initially when you're creating this list, there has to be something there as an example, but then you can clear it afterwards. So you're able to start with start from scratch when you're creating your list. Okay, I'm going to move on to the duplicate values tab. And this example is going to demonstrate how you can prevent a duplicate number from being entered. So this could be if you were creating, say, a list of invoices or an inventory list with part numbers. Anytime there's a unique number, this will evaluate to see whether you've already used that number and give you an error message. So as we've done all along, we make sure we first of all start with selecting the range we want this to apply to. And then in the data tab, we're going to go to data validation. And in the allow, once again, I'm choosing custom. And then for this formula, we're going to be using the function, the count if function. So we're going to put in the equal sign and then the word count if. So that's the count if function. And then this one, we have to actually specify the full range. So I'm doing A2 to A104856. And I know that from all the other times that I have selected the range. It's the last row possible in the spreadsheet. And then a comma, and then A2 again, and then a closing bracket, and then equals 1. So I'm just going to look in here just to make sure that I have it. So A2 to 104, just double checking this number, and then I'm going to click the error alert tab. And for the title, I'm going to put in invoice. And then the error message will be the invoice number has already been used. Okay, and now to test this, I'm going to put in invoice 12345. Then I'm going to put in another number. So I'm just randomly putting in numbers. So you can see how easy it would be to lose sight of what numbers you've already used when you get a long list. So this could be a list, huge list of numbers, and then all of a sudden, if I happen to type a number that I've already used, and I can see it's not recognizing it. So I used the same number. So let me double check that I've got this. Oops. Okay, so I'm just going to clear those. I'm just highlighting everything again. I just want to double check. Okay, that looks correct. There we go. I must have put a space in or something when I was entering it in. So you can see it definitely is telling me that I've already used the number. Okay, now moving on to the next tab, allow numeric or text entries. This is going to, I'm going to give you both examples. This is going to restrict it so you only enter numbers in a cell, or that you only enter text. So if you happen to enter text in the numeric column, you will get an error message. So this is one's fairly simple. In the numeric column, you're going to select all the cells, go to data validation, and again, this is custom. So the formula is using the isNumber function. And I actually forgot to do the error, so I'm just going to go back in there again, and the title will be number. So I keep leaving my caps lock on. I just got a new keyboard. I'm still getting used to it. Okay, so a message to indicate what's wrong. And now if I try and type, oh, I don't know what happened there. I just pressed a key. Sorry, I really am getting used to this keyboard. I pressed some key that just locked my screen. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so in the numeric, what I was trying to type was a capital with my name on it. Okay, there we go. So you can see I've entered text in that column and it says only numbers are allowed in this cell. So I'll retry that. I'll put in a number and I don't get the error. So similarly, we can do the same thing with the isText function. Oops. Okay, and again, I'm going to go to data validation and choose custom, and this will read equals isText. And now I'm putting in C2. So actually in your handout, I've got that incorrect. I've got the example of isText A2. That only is applicable if we're in column A. I need to put in C2 because I'm in column C. And now when I click OK, if I now try and put a number here, I'm going to get an error. And I forgot to put the error message in. So once again, I can highlight everything. And this should have read only text is allowed in this cell. And there we get the correct error. Okay, so now for validate an entry based on another cell, it's the next tab. So now how this one is going to work is you can create a rule that will be based on the value in another cell. So in this example, I'm going to prevent the entry in the hours column if the job entry or the job number and the description have been left blank. So assumption is this is like a timesheet of some sort. So if I put hours in, but there's no description or job number, then it doesn't make any sense. So I want to make sure that that gets entered first or not doesn't get left out. And then I'll get an error message just as a reminder that I haven't filled that information in. So the first step for this is to make sure the hours are selected. So, because this is where, so it's when I'm entering information in the hours column that I want to prevent the entry. And I'm going to go to data validation, click on my settings. So this is another custom, and the formula is using the COUNTIF as well. So I'm looking at the range of A2 to B2. So it's both those cells. Now, I'm not always sure whether it's case sensitive or not. So as a habit, I always make sure I'm using capitals for my range name or for my cell references. So the two quotation marks that I'm putting in, so what it's doing there is it's evaluating whether the range from A2 to B2 is blank. So the two quotation marks indicate it's blank. And now when I choose OK, and again, I forgot about my error message. So I'm going back, I'm going to click error alert, and I'm going to just leave the title blank. You can do that. So I'm going to just say job description, and description can't be blank. Actually, that should say job number. Okay, so I'm going to click OK. And now if I try and fill in some hours here, I'm going to get an error message. So letting me know that these cannot be blank. So now I'll put in a job number and a description. And now you can see I can put the hours in and there's no problem. Okay, so now for this next one, I don't actually have a separate tab for this. I'm just going to use this same spreadsheet. So something else that you can do is you can restrict the length of the text. So entries might need to be a specific text length or no more than a certain number of characters. And so we can create a rule that will ensure that whatever you enter is not longer than the number of characters. So the example I'm going to give here is with the job number. So the example in your handout, it talks about an invoice number, but in this case, it's going to be the job number. I want the job number to be set to exactly 9 characters. So I'm going to delete the existing job number that's there, and I'm going to select the whole range. And I'm going to go back to data validation and back to settings. So in the allow, what I'm going to change here is I'm going to choose the option of text length. And I'm going to change it from between to equal to. And then I'm going to type in the length. So I want it to be 9 characters. I'm going to go to the error alert tab. The title, I'm going to put job number. And then for the error message, I'm going to say the job number must be 9 characters in length. Okay, so now if I only type 5 characters, I'm going to get an error message. So now I know I need to do and now it accepts that number. Now what I'm going to do with this job number now is I'm going to clear what I've put in there. So I'm going to do Shift Control down arrow back to data validation, and I'm going to clear. So that will clear the validation from that cell. And the next one I'm going to show you is I'm going to combine 2 functions. I'm going to combine the is number and the find, and this is going to ensure that the cell contains specific text. So the assumption is with this job number is the job number needs to have a specific string of text included in it. So it's going to have CYE in its string. So that the assumption is that it has to have, the job number has to have that in it. So in order to set this up, I've got to select the whole range again and go to my data validation and my settings, and I'm changing it to custom. So the formula I'm going to put in here for the function is number, and then in brackets find. So it's going to find within that. Oops, sorry, I pressed enter too quickly here. So I'm putting CYE, I'm putting the text that I'm looking for in quotation marks, and then the cell that I'm looking within. Okay, so this is going to check what I put in A2, and it's going to check to see if the letters CYE are in it. And again, I'm going to go to my error alert, put in job number. Okay, so there's my error. Okay, so to test this, I'm going to put in the wrong number. So I'm going to put in CYD. And I get the error message. So it tells me that it must contain that. So I'm going to retry, and I can see I can just click up here in the formula bar, change it to an E, and now it accepts it. Now, it's possible when you're within, so let's say I'm working within this worksheet and I don't know whether there's any data validation in it. So if I want to check whether the current worksheet has validated cells, I can use it. I can go to, in the Home tab, I can go to Find and Select over here. So this is normally a function that you use for finding text, but you can see at the bottom of the Find and Select, I have an option that says Data Validation. So I'm going to choose that, and you can see there it highlights the 2 cells that I have data validation in. So that, because it's highlighted it, if I then wanted to check what the validation was, I could go to this one, highlight it, and then go into, so I'd have to actually, so it doesn't tell you what it is, but it does tell you what cells have the data validation. So as another example now, if I go to my duplicate values one, and again, go to home, find and select, there you can see it highlights that range. If I go here to the dependent drop-down list, actually I'm going to go to the city and states one, and it tells me that no cells were found because this is the tab that just had the lists on it. It didn't actually have any validation in it. So it's an easy way of being able to quickly check to see whether there's any validation set up. Now, if the other thing is if you were in, I'm going to just go back here to the first one. So the other thing is if it's identified a range, so now I'm just going to click in this cell. If I go to, without highlighting the range, if I go to data validation, it goes and highlights the whole thing. Or sorry, it doesn't highlight, it does give me the information. But if, let's just see, I'm trying to, if I only select maybe a portion of it, I'm just trying to get the error. Yeah, there we go. So I didn't select everything. I just selected a portion of the cells, and it comes up and it says this selection can contain some cells without data validation because I've included the heading at the top. And so it's asking if I want to extend the data validation to those cells. So if I'm wanting to extend it to the heading, which I don't want. So if I said no, it still takes me to the dialog box and it actually clears it as well. So you want to be sort of careful of that. If you do happen to select, if you do happen to include the heading, it just clears it completely. So I would have to say yes to this, and now I get this coming up. Or if when that message came up, instead of clicking yes, if I click no, and then I would just reselect the correct information. So I want to watch for that message. If that message does come up, it's best to cancel and then reselect the information. And then as I've already showed you, but just to confirm, if you do want to clear the validation, you can go into the data validation tab and choose the clear all, and that will clear it all, and then you can create a new set of information. Okay, so that is all of the examples I have for you today, and I see it as 10 to 12, so we could maybe try and cover some questions if there are any at this point.
Yeah, Lori, we do have a couple of good questions that I think would be great for you to cover.
Okay.
The second one is what you were just kind of going over, but she's asking if you can create a validation after the column of numbers are on the spreadsheet, or do you have to build the validation first before inputting the data?
Oh, good question. So let's see. So if I had, so I've just gone to another column here, just to, I think the answer is yes. I just want to verify that though.
I do too.
Okay, so there's my information. So I do already have some information there. I'm going to select, and you don't have to select the whole thing. Like if you don't think your spreadsheet's going to be enormous, you can just, you don't have to highlight everything. I'm just going to highlight as far as here, but that means it's only going to apply to those cells. So then I'm going to go in here, and this was the one that I wanted to make sure was set for upper. So the formula will be, and now because I'm now in another column, I'm going to make sure that this is C2, and then the word upper, and again C2. Maybe it won't let us. I think I've got everything
You have
right.
2 end parens.
There is supposed to be 2.
Oh, but I only see 1 open.
Yeah, that is correct.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Have I spelled exact correctly? I did.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's it telling me is wrong? There's a problem. I done wrong here.
So are you supposed to have a, oh, there, that looks better with the A2, I think.
No, it's
Right.
just,
Yeah,
it needs to be
C2.
C2 because I'm in column C, right?
Right.
I'm having issues with my site. The dialog box is so small.
Yeah.
Okay, so I must have had a typo in there. I don't know what their typo was. But yes, that does let me, so it does let you have, you can't create it when the data is already in there.
Awesome. Okay, the
Yeah.
other question was from a little bit earlier. When you were, can you copy the validations and edit the validation criteria? For example, could you copy equals count if into the next cell and change it to is number or whatever formula you want to use? Or do they have to create them? You have to create them individually each time. Do you know what she's asking?
Yeah, so
As you were
like
typing those in.
so if I didn't already have this one, oh, hang on. So you wanted to know whether you can copy the validation to another cell without having to create it again?
Yeah, I think the syntax as much as anything, because you were doing, I think it was the state and the city, but there was something where you had two on the same page, maybe 2 sheets ago. And you, let's see, where was it? In any case, you were doing is text and then is number on the same sheet. You had two
Oh,
validations.
yes, and this one.
Yeah.
So this one, the validation is number. So
Right,
I
so
could
could you
do
copy
this.
this?
I could
Yeah.
copy that. And then when I go to do this one, if it hadn't already been done, then when I got in here, I could do that and then change it to, or hang on, let's just try another scenario. So let's say I want to have another numeric one here. So what I'm just going to try is if I copy the cell, I don't think it does it. Oh, it does. Okay. So you can
Wow.
just copy the cells and it will, but the only thing is I think now, did it change the range? It did.
Boy, that's impressive.
I've never tried that before, but yeah. So I mean, let's just recap that because I didn't know that was going to happen. So here I want to have text. So I'm just going to make sure I select all of these cells. I'm going to copy and then I'm going to paste over there. And so all I've done is, all it looks like is I've copied blank cells, but I have now taken the data validation over there and it's actually changed automatically for me the range. So yes, to answer that question, you can copy the data validation from one range to another, and it will automatically change the cell references.
Fantastic. Someone's wondering if it's based on the paste option selected. Did you choose a paste option?
I didn't choose one. What are my defaults? Let's try that again. No, so I didn't choose one. I just did the default. So where down here it says select destination and press enter. So I just went to the new destination and pressed enter.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so I haven't changed my default paste options. Actually, now that I didn't know that, does Excel have default paste options? I know that Word does.
I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't, off the top of my head, I can't think of whether it does. Maybe it'd be under advanced. Oh yeah, copy and paste. Yeah, so there aren't any default options. Like I mean, like you can't, like, you know how in Word you can say I want the default to be formatted as text or destination formatting. You can't set that here. So it's just picking up. So if essentially, again, if you're going to copy the validation, you highlight the cells, you copy it, you go to where you want it to go. And I don't even have to click paste. I'm just following this message down here in the bottom left. It says select the destination and press enter. So I'm just pressing enter, which is me a faster way to paste because then I'm not having to hit the paste button.
Excellent. That's the only questions I see. Yeah, we all like that. As always, if you guys think of something after the fact, feel free to send it along and we'll see what we can do to help you. Did you have anything else you wanted to wrap up with, Lori?
No, I think that's everything. I would encourage you to if this is of interest to you and you want to see other examples, if you went and did a search for data validation, there's all kinds of video, there's all kinds of other examples that you can find. I've kind of, given the hour that we had, I picked the ones that I felt would be most. These are the ones that I have definitely used. But there, as I said, there are other scenarios as well that you can go with. But these are, as I said, are some typical examples.